When you're standing in the lab, trying to decide whether to pull the trigger on an analytical balance, the thought that keeps popping up is, will this thing actually give me the confidence I need without turning my bench into a high-maintenance circus? I get it, especially if you've spent a few nights wrestling with a cheaper scale that drifts after every weigh-in, or you've seen a colleague lose a batch of reagents because the balance was off by a fraction of a milligram. Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. Let's walk through what the Ohaus PR224 brings to the table, where it shines, and when you might be better off looking elsewhere, so you don't waste money on a piece of equipment that doesn't fit your workflow. First off, the PR224 is marketed as a 220-gram analytical balance with 0.0001 gram readability and an internal calibration feature. Those numbers sound impressive, but the real question is how they translate into everyday use. In a typical chemistry teaching lab, you might be weighing out a few milligrams of a solid for a titration. The internal calibration means you can press a button and let the balance auto-zero itself against an internal reference weight, eliminating the need to pull out a separate calibration weight every time you change the environment or after a power cycle. I've seen that convenience make a noticeable difference when you're juggling multiple experiments and can't afford to spend 5 minutes recalibrating between each run. One of the strengths that becomes evident right away is the balance's interface. The digital display is clear, with a backlight that stays bright enough even when you're working under a fume hood with the lights dimmed. The unit selector lets you toggle between grams, milligrams, and micrograms without digging through menus, which is a practical win when you switch from weighing a bulk reagent to a trace impurity. The pan size, while modest at around 55 mm in diameter, is just right for standard weighing boats and small weighing papers. It won't accommodate a large beaker, but you're not buying an analytical balance to weigh a beaker anyway, that's where a top-loading balance belongs. Power is another area where the PR224 shows a thoughtful design. It runs on an AC adapter but also includes a battery backup option. In a teaching environment where power outages can interrupt a class, the battery can keep the balance functional long enough to finish a critical weigh. That said, the battery life isn't endless. You'll get a few hours of use before needing to recharge, so it's not a substitute for a reliable main supply, but it does add a safety net. Now, let's talk about the hidden trade-offs. The 220-gram capacity is generous for an analytical balance, but you have to remember the readability limit of 0.0001 G. If you try to push the balance near its maximum capacity, the resolution effectively drops, and you might start seeing more noise in the readout. In practice, I've found that staying under about 150 grams gives you the cleanest data. That's fine for most analytical tasks, but if you routinely need to weigh larger quantities with high precision, say, bulk solid dosing for formulation work, you'll start to feel the constraints. Another practical consideration is the environment sensitivity. Analytical balances are notorious for being finicky about drafts, vibrations, and temperature swings. The PR224 does a decent job of self-calibrating, but it won't magically cancel out a draft from an open door or a vibrating centrifuge on the same bench. Users have reported needing to place the balance on a dedicated anti-vibration table or at least on a solid, level surface. If your lab space is cramped and you share benches with equipment that hums, you may need to budget for that extra isolation platform. Who should buy the Ohaus PR224? If you're a teaching professor, a student researcher, or a small-scale quality control lab that needs reliable microgram measurements without investing in a high-end research-grade balance, this model hits a sweet spot. The internal calibration cuts down on downtime, the interface is intuitive for people who aren't balance specialists, and the price point, while not cheap, is reasonable compared to the premium analytical balances that sit in the 5-figure range. It's also a good fit for hobbyist chemists who have a dedicated bench and want to step up from kitchen scales but don't need the ruggedness of a lab-grade instrument. Conversely, if you're working in a high-throughput pharmaceutical environment where you need to weigh up to a kilogram with sub-milligram precision, the PR224 will feel cramped. The limited pan size, the reduced resolution near capacity, and the lack of advanced features like automatic data logging or connectivity to lab information systems make it a less optimal choice for those settings. Also, if you're a forensic analyst who needs to meet strict accreditation standards, you'll likely need a balance that offers built-in documentation and audit trails, which the PR224 does not provide. In terms of day-to-day strengths, the internal calibration and ease of unit switching are the most tangible benefits. I've seen students finish a series of gravimetric analyses in half the